Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Hello, welcome back to the Rising Convert podcast. It's your host, Kelly, and I'm excited to have you join me in today's episode. This is all about how to not feel lonely after becoming a Muslim, or that could be before becoming a Muslim for some of you. But yeah, this is going to be an episode that's going to be part of the Becoming a Muslim series, because I do feel like it makes sense to make it a part of that. There's a lot of things that can come and make more sense during the time of taking your shahada or leading up to taking your shahada. And I believe the feeling of loneliness sparks and is heightened. That feeling is amplified during that peak moment of you taking your shahada and trying to live the best life that you possibly can and dive into your practice as a Muslim. So, as some of you may know who have been listening to this podcast, it does focus on my own personal thoughts, along with discussions on experiences and having engaging, candid conversations with others from a Muslim perspective. So, inshallah, this episode can be helpful to you. Please leave a comment, and I love to respond to them and react to them in any sort of form on Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. You can find me there at Rising Convert Podcast and on TikTok's Instagram at Rising Convert. Okay, inshallah, you can gain something from today, and let's get started and dive into it. Feeling lonely. I remember when I first took my shahada in the beginning, I felt quite excited and I felt happy and relieved that I can finally step into this new chapter of my life without feeling quite guilty. And I felt empowered as a woman. I felt like I was very strong and I was really coming into my adult life, because for so long you feel so tied to your mom, your dad, or your family, your siblings, and you feel like you can't really detach. And really, like, once you're able to kind of break out of that attachment sense of like strong bond, I feel like you're able to create your own life. You're able to feel confident about the decisions that you're making for yourself, because you're now owning your life. And so that's what I felt like for me when I took my shahada. I was like, you know what? I'm no longer holding back, because I'm no longer thinking about what my parents are going to think. I'm no longer thinking that I have to live the same life as my family. I just know that this is the best decision for me, so I went all in. So with that, I felt this high sense of commitment and drive to go all in the beginning. And I talk a little bit about this in my previous episodes, again, part of the Becoming a Muslim series. And what I was doing is I was opening myself up so much and sharing so much about Islam to my friends and family, to the point that as I'm sharing, it took some time, but the more and more I found myself talking about Islam and sharing my why behind certain things that I was doing, my family and my friends, the way that they responded, some which were like great, others which, they didn't quite get, which is fine because they don't understand. I felt lonely, because I don't like to shove a lot of information down people's throats. I recognize that may have happened in the beginning, but the point is, like, I kept almost doing these things, like oversharing, not almost ignoring the social cues that were quite obvious with my friends and family, and that made it feel awkward. And there's a sense of disconnection that I was starting to get when it came to hanging out with my friends, when it came to hanging with my family, dinner time specifically, especially because shortly after I took my shahada, I was also going to experience my first Ramadan. And when that happened, I felt even more lonely. And yeah, like, there's a moment there where I was like, wow, I have these beautiful people in my life, but I am friendless. I am all alone, with no one to turn to, and no one is going to be able to understand that. So that was when the feeling of loneliness was really kicking in. And then what amplified that feeling was when I started going to the mosque. So some of you might be like, what do you mean? Like, so when I went to the mosque, I did it because I was ready to go all in. And my brother's friend at the time introduced me to his sister, who introduced me to a mosque that she was going to. So I went a couple times with her, and then when we didn't go together, I'd go to another one that was near, like closer to my house. And when I started attending, I didn't know anybody, and I quickly felt like a shift in my energy. I was no longer the outgoing, open person that I normally am. I was really quiet. I found myself shutting down, engaging in group conversations or just with a single conversation with someone, and almost felt like I was just saying things, like overcompensating by saying something silly. Again, also not feeling like myself, like I couldn't be myself authentically, and almost like I didn't even know how to start a conversation. So I was like, what is this? Like, why am I feeling so icky going to the mosque? It's not what I wanted. Now, apart from that, I will say the spiritual, I guess, connection that people feel when they like go to the mosque, say even on for Jummah prayer, Friday prayers, where it's a congregational prayer and they feel like coming together and doing it together is something that's very powerful. Like those things I did feel. Nonetheless, like that feeling of loneliness really kicked in, because when apart from not feeling like myself and not knowing what to do, the way I saw how people were interacting with each other, or they would kind of look and glare like, who is this new person? But they wouldn't say anything, but it was so obvious they were staring. We dressed the same. I mean, we dressed differently. These people that I was in the room with spoke a different language that I didn't speak. It was quite clear that a lot of them knew each other in some sort of way. I understood that there was like a sense of community already that was built amongst them. And essentially, if you don't know somebody who knows somebody, you wouldn't really even have a chance really to talk. Or if someone did, they would just do a quick hi and zip, go the other way. And that was pretty much it. And I felt like an outcast. And I was like, wow, okay, well, this is not really what I expected. And so I asked myself again, like, okay, why do I feel like this? I was almost kind of like forcing myself to go because I thought it would be better, but I didn't. And then I recognized that majority of the people in the room are likely to be born Muslim, are likely to be practicing this for so long, and they don't know me. There was like one odd woman who came up to me and she was like, hey, like, welcome, if you need anything, come on in, whatever. But I guess what ended up happening is, after taking in what was going on with my friends and my family, and again, not being able to turn to them, and then feeling like I couldn't even turn to like the Muslim community because I just felt so awkward and it didn't feel right. Like it felt disingenuous to even be in that place or even participate in certain conversations and activities. I was like, yeah, okay, it just doesn't, it feels so forced, and I hate the feeling of forcing something, especially with someone or a group of people. I'm like, this isn't aligning with who I am and what I believe in. So I was like, I'm not doing that. So once I've recognized that, okay, I was like, okay, well, I admit the fact that, you know what, I clearly don't have anybody, and I'm also missing out on an opportunity here. Like something's not right. So I had to get real with myself, and I had to admit to the fact that I probably had a role to play in this experience that I was having. So part of this adjustment phase is what I'm calling it, because it truly is. I realized that there is an adjustment phase. After you take your shahada, you are communicating to your people who are then trying to figure out ways on how to navigate this new relationship with you and this new like way of life and how it's going to impact them and you. And then on top of that, you are also adjusting to the Muslim community, the Muslim ways, and then probably getting even more realistic with it not being also so peaches and rainbows. Like there is talk about how the Muslim community lacks the sense of welcoming to a revert convert. Oftentimes people don't know how to, work with us, be around us. So like there's that, right? So you're coming to face with like reality essentially. And so I was like, I need to break this down into a way where I can create a successful criteria, think about the things, the tools, resources that are out there for me that will work and make sense to make this feeling, I guess, disappear. And work towards that so I can feel really good and I don't have to feel alone, because feeling alone is not something that I need to stick with and sit with forever. No, it's something that I can change, right? I can do something with this feeling. I can do something about it. So I was like, okay, I'm going to do that. And once I've set that successful criteria out and I put it out there for myself, I was like, okay, now I can start this inner transformation. Now I can make it happen. So these are 3 things that I'm going to tell you that I did for myself, and I think it can help you, inshallah. And so the first one is becoming aware of my nonverbal cues. So people talk about crossed arms, open arms, right? If you're crossed, you're closed off. If your arms are not crossed, you're a bit more open. And this is something that we hear about in a workplace, in meeting someone, and it makes sense. It makes sense why people talk about it. And so for me, I wanted to fix my nonverbal cues because I knew that that was playing a huge role and was giving me like conservative energy, nothing positive, very closed off type of energy. And I didn't like that. It made me feel stiff as well in my body, very tense in the face. And I believe people were seeing that. And I was also having a lot of like the resting face. It probably lasted for so long. And I couldn't snap out of it, but I became aware of it. So I was reflecting. I was like, okay, what are things that I'm doing that are not like me? And that's how I came up with this list of nonverbal cues that I was like, I'm probably doing this. So I would make it a goal, like the next time I'd go to a gathering, so whether it was like a Quran study or going to the mosque for prayer or just going to go listen to a lecture in person, I'd be like, okay, I'm going to try to lighten up my face, like open up my eyes, maybe just like I would do things that would make me feel good and more alive. Like I would cleanse my face, like wash it and feel refreshed. So that would make me feel good, like kind of tapping into my feminine energy in that way. And it makes me feel very airy and light. So I would walk in feeling that way and I would tell myself, okay, now Kel, smile. And every now and then I would make a conscious effort to, roll my shoulders back, like take a kind of look around, sit a bit taller, or like roll my shoulders back, stand a little taller, and essentially have a very confident stance. And that really made all the difference in my first experiment of doing this. And it made a difference in like people can feel that. I think people saw me as like, ooh, like I'm not just this person coming in with my head down, doing the usual. Like I wanted to stick out. I wanted to stick out for a reason because I wanted to have a friend. I wanted to engage in conversations that were going to make me feel good. And I also wanted to show who I truly am as a person. And I just wasn't doing that. So I was like, I need to make it happen. Like, so that's what I did. And yes, like people did wave high. And so I started waving high. I would smile more. These changes in my behaviors really set the mood for me and set the tone for those around me. And I even did the smallest thing, which leads me to the second thing that I did, which is paying attention to details. I would take myself from like one place of the room to next and stand next to another person in the room who was maybe standing alone, to close that distance, to close that gap, so I can just say hi and maybe create a conversation, or maybe just do an icebreaker and be like, like I'm going to give them their space. I'm just going to, in case there's more people that need to come, and I'm just going to stand right next to you if that's all right. And they'll be like, yeah, okay, no problem. And then I'll just be like, oh, how are you doing? And then the rest is kind of history. It will kind of start from there. So I would literally close the gap. So by what I mean by paying attention to details is there's moments in time where we would pray and some people wouldn't pray at the mosque. Now, it's none of my business to ask like, hey, why aren't you praying or what's going on? I would just notice that. So I would migrate next to those who weren't, if I wasn't as well, and I would just kind of stand there and again, create the conversation, close the gap. I would also notice that there's certain people that would interact with one another, or they would maybe talk about out loud in the room about an event or about curiosity on a topic that maybe I was curious about. So I would dive into that and I would say, oh, like I'm actually curious because I'm fairly new. I would use an opportunity to open myself up and talk about how I'm new Muslim. And then they would be like, oh, okay. And I know you might be thinking like, why weren't you able to do this before? And I think it's because I was so caught up in my feeling of like, icky, loneliness, not feeling good, and feeling like such an outcast that I couldn't even see beyond what I was feeling. And that happens, like that happened to me. So I think that's why I couldn't read into those opportunities and see those opportunities earlier on. So yeah, I would pay attention to what people are saying, certain conversations, where it was like an open to the room, and I would dive into them. I would also notice people's hijabs for the ladies that were there, and I would just make comments, like obviously genuine comments, and I was like, okay, compliments, and I'm like, oh, it's different this time, or I wouldn't have the same attire that some of these women would have. So I would always ask like, oh, where did you get that? And that would be also a conversation starter as well. And so I would pay attention to certain details of what someone is doing. I would also take a look at the room, and I would study it. I started studying the room. And if I saw someone who was carrying that nervous energy, like the way I may have from the beginning, I would go and talk to them and try to make them feel open and welcome. If I knew someone who was like similar to me or looked a little bit different from somebody else in the room, I would also pay attention to that and make way to maybe go and like talk to them, and we can kind of find some common ground. And that really worked for me. It really worked for me, and I think people became more receptive, and they're like, oh, like over the time of me going and attending the mosque, I can see that women are now starting to notice me, and they would come or they say hi. They would kind of get a feel of my personality, that I'm very talkative, I can be quite social, and I have an interest in learning. And so it really helped me, I guess, in my social game to some extent. The third thing was exploring the origin of my feelings. Like when I was feeling like an outcast and I was feeling lonely, like companionless, I would tell myself why. Like, why am I still feeling this way if I'm connecting with people? So going back to like my experience after paying attention to details and becoming and fixing my like nonverbal cues, the sense of loneliness didn't necessarily go away. It just, the feeling was lessened. Like I wasn't as strong as it was before, but I still felt like there was something missing, and I couldn't really put my finger on it right away. So I had to kind of reflect again and sit with my feeling and ask myself, why do I still feel like this? And even when it came with my friends and family as well, like when they started, accommodating and making some changes, and adjusting accordingly and being very communicative about their feelings, it felt good. It felt really warm, because I was like, wow, these people love me, they care about me, and they're really showing it in many forms. And obviously this adjustment phase there's no time limit to it. It's just, especially when it comes to other people aside from you. And I wanted to understand like, okay, is it still me, or is it just maybe the people that I'm with? And then I realized at the end of the day, these two groups of people, like the born Muslims, the Muslim community who know each other, and my friends and family, like my loved ones in my personal life, they don't understand like where I'm coming from and what I may be experiencing and working through, because they're not Muslim converts, reverts. They don't know what my journey looks like. They don't have any inside scoop of, who I'm talking to or how much I know and where I'm at in my level of commitment and what that looks like, right, on a scale of like 1 to 10. They don't know any of that. Their knowledge of like, for the Muslim people, for the Muslim community, like of who I am, where I come from, why I am a certain way, they don't ask, and right now they go off of like what they perceive of me. And then with my loved ones, they don't know anything about Islam, what the practice is about. They may ask a few questions, but they're not going to also dive in that much into it, because there's not much interest there. Because if there was in the beginning, they would have asked it. But I think their interest was more on like, okay, how can we manage this relationship? So the focus is different during this beginning part of the adjustment phase. So for me, I was like, okay, well, because they will never know what I'm going through, that is still why I'm feeling like an outcast. That is still why I feel like I'm not able to have a strong attachment towards them. And so I was like, okay, you know what? I'm going to use the skills that I have right now and become more open and vocal about the things that I want and need. Apart from making dua for this, like making prayer for this sense of feeling to like go away, I was connecting with people in the Muslim community. So I was telling them like, yeah, like, I'd love to connect and get to know other Muslim reverts, converts. And I would sometimes tell them like, again, this is my goal. I want to read the Quran or I want to connect with people who can teach lessons and break them down in more of a simplified way. Because there's so much to cover in Islam. And subhanAllah, like literally what happened was, so the friend that I knew who introduced me to the mosque took me to then a late night, like all women called halika, like study group again. And through that, someone introduced me to somebody else who then introduced me to the lady who I spoke to and brought me into the all-women halakha group. And that is when I connected with a lot of Muslim reverts, converts, women from, various ages, various backgrounds and cultures. And we got along so great because we were sharing the same thing. We had similar stories. We found that we were able to lean on each other and trust in each other's like prayers and in each other's like group to really like rise above of like these challenges and trials that we were going through with our family and friends, but also within ourselves as Muslims, because feeling lonely can really take away from this experience of excitement that you've chosen for your life. Because for some of us, we're probably experiencing it a lot more deeper and it's a lot more harder if our family is not accepting or if we lose friends along the way, people that we love along the way. And so having that group of women who understand what you're going through, we can laugh, we can joke, we can play, who have, maybe similar history and we're sharing and we're talking about it was so fun. And then it was literally a gathering that I was so committed to every Friday. And this is the group that I also mentioned in my Becoming a Muslim series. And this is the group that I've had after I guess what we call the adjustment phase for me personally, not about with my family, but for me. When I was adjusting to the community, the Muslim community, I had found this other different community, which is the Muslim revert convert group. And I absolutely loved it. And it really was a game changer for me. And that is really what helped me remove the sense of loneliness, especially in the beginning, because you're opening yourself up to a new adventure. Shortly after, inshallah, with the help of others and some support, if you find yourself in a place like this, you're going to realize that over the time, your deen, your taqwa is going to grow immensely. And with that growing, you're going to realize that you are stronger than you think you are. And you are going to be able to overcome this challenge, this feeling of isolation that you may be feeling right now. And with that, I was able to honestly surpass that sense of I need a group so I can feel good and not feel alone as a Muslim. Because I don't necessarily feel that way anymore. It's not something that I set a timeline to. It just kind of happened when I decided to move to Alberta, to a different province. I was like, oh, I don't have this group anymore. But subhanAllah, like I feel stronger than ever in who I am as a Muslim, and I don't feel that sense of loneliness anymore because I'm not bothered by these external factors anymore. So it is a phase. It does happen for some of us. And so I hope that whatever it is I shared here today, inshallah, it can help you in your journey. Please leave a comment if you have any tips so other brothers and sisters who are listening to today's episode can have some insight in what it is that you're doing, and hopefully it can help them, because I'm sure there's other tools out there that some of you may have tapped into. So put them in the comments. I'd love to read them, respond to them, and maybe post them on my TikTok at Rising Convert, and we can connect that way, inshallah. All right, everyone, take care. I hope you guys are having a great day, and we'll catch you in the next one. Stay tuned.